know that it took him many, many years before he felt he could even begin to tell his story. And we thank him for his service and the story that he has told us in respect of it. As we mark Armistice Day, we give our eternal thanks to Mervyn and all those who served, and remember the extraordinary sacrifice of ordinary people who fought to defend our freedom. Mr. Speaker, the House will also want to join me in remembering Holocaust survivor Manfred Goldberg. He showed the most extraordinary courage to share his testimony, and in his memory, we must ensure that never again means never again. Mr. Speaker, I welcome the news that SSE have announced that they will spend £33 billion on clean energy projects in this country. That's a major vote of confidence in the UK economy, happening because of our decisions to embrace the opportunities of clean power. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Good job. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's remarks about remembrance? I particularly remember in 1997 in West Africa, where I somehow managed to survive a bloody and violent attempted coup. So if the Prime Minister wants any ideas about how to do that, he only has to ask. The Prime Minister's questions last week was, Mr. Speaker, an absolute bin fire. So if the Prime Minister is indeed intent on promoting the United Kingdom on the world stage, please can he promise the House that he will never, ever, ever be away on a Wednesday ever again?
Well, it's always great to hear from the successor for Kwasi Kwarteng's constituency, Mr. Speaker. I'm very proud to represent our country on the world stage last week in COP, before that in NATO, and it's because of the reputation we've rebuilt over the last 15, 16 months that other countries now want to do trade deals with us and want to place their orders with us.
Sally Jameson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I also associate myself with the remarks from the Prime Minister? The Prime Minister will be aware of the campaign run by the trustees of the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme, which is campaigning to return the £2.3 billion investment reserve back to its members, 700 of which are in Doncaster Central. The Labour government delivered on its manifesto pledge for the MPS scheme last year, so will the Prime Minister also ensure that fairness and justice is delivered to the BCSS members at the upcoming budget, and will he meet with me and other Coalfield MPs to discuss further?
Well, I know how committed she is to righting historic wrongs for our mining communities, and I can assure her so am I. She will know we've already transferred £1.5 billion that was wrongly kept from over 100,000 former mine workers. Ministers, as she knows, have met the BCSS trustees on several occasions. The Industry Minister is meeting them later on today, and I'll make sure that she's updated in relation to that.
Kemi Badenoch, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And can I associate my party with the Prime Minister's comments about Remembrance Week, and also his comments on Manfred Goldberg and Mervyn Kirsch, who is in the gallery today. Mr. Speaker, this morning on the BBC, the Health Secretary said there is a toxic culture in Downing Street that needs to change. He's right, isn't he?
Mr. Speaker, my focus each and every day is on rebuilding and renewing our country. But let me be absolutely clear, any attack on any member of my cabinet is completely unacceptable. On the Health Secretary, Mr. Speaker, in relation to Health Secretary, he promised before the election that in the first year of a Labour government we'd deliver 2 million extra appointments. We didn't deliver 2 million, or 3 or 4. We delivered 5 million extra appointments. And today the Health Secretary is in Manchester, where he's announcing that because of the action he's taken to abolish NHS England, he's putting more people on the front line. He's doing a great job, as is the whole of my cabinet.
Mr. Speaker, what we heard the Health Secretary say this morning was that he wants to cut waiting lists, but we all know that there's only one waiting list that he really wants to cut. But the Prime Minister is not going to do anything about the toxic culture. This is his responsibility. Just last night, his allies accused not just the Health Secretary, but the Home Secretary and even the Energy Secretary of launching leadership bids. These attacks came from number 10, nowhere else, his toxic number 10. The person responsible for the culture in number 10 is his Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney. Does the Prime Minister have full confidence in him?
Morgan McSweeney, my team and I are absolutely focused on delivering for the country. And let me be clear, of course, Mr Speaker, I've never authorised attacks on Cabinet members. I appointed them to their posts because they're the best people to carry out their jobs. Mr Speaker, she asks about waiting lists. Waiting lists are down under this government. The number of GPs is up. Because we've scrapped NHS England, we're investing on the front line. That's what the Health Secretary is doing today, getting on with his job, and he's doing a very good job too.
Mr Speaker, I didn't hear him give full confidence to Morgan McSweeney, but the truth is he says these attacks aren't authorised. That means he's lost control of number 10, because that's where they're coming from. But the real scandal, Mr Speaker, the real scandal is that 2 weeks from a budget, the government has descended into civil war. Instead of fixing the mess they've made of the economy, they're all... Mr Speaker, they're all chuntering. These are the feral MPs that number 10 has been talking about. They're not my words, they're number 10's words, his words. But unbelievably, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister's advisers have been reduced to briefing that MPs can't get rid of him, and I'm not making this up, they can't get rid of him because it would destabilise international markets. Why does the Prime Minister think that there would be a market meltdown if the Health Secretary took over?
Mr Speaker, this is a united team and we are delivering together. Look what we're doing. The fastest growth of the G7. 5 interest rate cuts. Trade deals with the EU, the US and India, all of which they oppose. We've delivered. And I can update the House.
If people want to audition for a pantomime, I suggest you go to the Old Vic.
Pantomime. Mr Speaker, I can update the House. The Bank of England has upgraded growth today. We've secured £230 billion of private investment. And just this morning, I thought she might welcome it, the SSE have announced £33 billion of investment in clean power. That's what this team are delivering for the country, fixing the mess that they left.
Mr Speaker, he's talking about growth and investment. While the Prime Minister desperately tries to cling on to his own job, perhaps he understands what it's like for all those people out there losing their jobs. How can he talk about growth? Yesterday, we learned that unemployment has risen to the same rate as it was in lockdown. 180,000 jobs lost, Mr Speaker. Why does the Prime Minister think that unemployment has risen every single month since Labour took office?
Mr Speaker, let me give the House the details. 329,000 people more are in work since the start of this year. So 329,000 more are in work. Of course, I accept we need to do more in relation to unemployment. That's why we're transforming job centres, which they opposed. That's why we're working with 60 major businesses to tackle ill health in the workplace and invested £3.8 billion in tailored back-to-work support, which they opposed. I would also remind the Leader of the Opposition, Mr Speaker, that the average unemployment in the 14 years of her government was 5.4%, higher than the rate today.
Mr Speaker, we left employment higher than it was after the last Labour government. Let me tell him now, what is causing it is his disastrous budget last year. That is what has caused the increase in unemployment. And so, to be clear, for all those Labour MPs shaking their heads, it's last year's tax rises that have killed jobs, and that's what's going to trigger this year's tax rises. This is the tax doom loop, and there is only one way out of it, and that is to cut spending. So why is the Prime Minister instead offering welfare giveaways to save his own skin?
Well, Mr Speaker, I'll tell the Opposition why we increased national insurance. It's because of the mess that they left the country in. The NHS on its knees. Now we've got 5 million extra appointments, waiting lists down, and 2,500 more GPs as a result of our decisions. But it's nearly the one-year anniversary, but she still hasn't told us in relation to national insurance whether she agrees and admits that we should do it, or if not, if that's her position, how she would find the money that we raised in the budget. She's had a whole year to think about that question. Perhaps now she can give us an answer.
Mr. Speaker, I wouldn't have made the stupid mistake in the first place of putting up the jobs tax and killing jobs. Since they came in, it's been disaster after disaster. The Deputy Prime Minister, the new Deputy Prime Minister, is clueless about how many illegal migrant sex offenders he's let loose. The Culture Secretary breaking the rules to give her donor a top job. Taxes set to rise even further. Unemployment at levels not seen since lockdown. And in the middle of it, a weak Prime Minister at war with his own cabinet. Mr. Speaker, it's not just him, it is all of them. There is no replacement, it is all of them. 2 weeks before the budget, isn't it the case that this Prime Minister has lost control of his government, he's lost the confidence of his party, and lost the trust of the British people?
Mr. Speaker, the stupid mistakes were made over 14 long years. They broke the economy, and now they think that they can lecture us. And now they've got this unserious idea that they can find £47 billion of cuts without saying where they're going to come from. No wonder that's called flimsy. Meanwhile, we're rebuilding the country. Wages up, investment up, mortgages down.
Order. Mr. Phil. You were meant to be a senior person on this front bench. You're meant to set an example. It's certainly a bad one today. Sir Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, despite extra government funding, adult social care services in my community are in disarray. My constituents are also facing a new fire risk because we don't have a fully functioning fire authority. This has all been caused by the dysfunction at Kent County Council because so many reform councillors have been suspended for bad behaviour. So does the Prime Minister share my concern that reform chaos is a risk to public safety?
My sympathy is with the people of Kent whose lives are being disrupted by the staggering incompetence of reform. Mr. Speaker, Kent County Council was supposed to be the blueprint for what reform would deliver across the country. Now we can see what that means. Cutting local services, raising council tax, failing to protect the public. That's all reform have to offer. Grievance, division and total incompetence.
Sir David, leader of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the earlier remarks of the Prime Minister and say what a great honour it was to join the royal family at the Cenotaph on Remembrance Sunday to pay our respects to all those heroes who gave their lives for our country. We must never forget the sacrifice they made for our freedoms. Mr. Speaker, a great British institution is under attack from a foreign government. President Trump is trying to destroy our BBC, not because he cares about the truth, but because he doesn't want to get away with his lies. Trump has undermined press freedom in America. Now he's trying to do the same here, disgracefully egged on by the leader of reform. So will the Prime Minister tell President Trump to drop his demand for a $1 billion settlement from the BBC? And will he guarantee that President Trump will not get a single penny from British licence fee payers?
Yeah. Let me be clear. I believe in a strong and independent BBC. Some would rather the BBC didn't exist. Some of them are sitting up there. I'm not one of them. In an age of disinformation, the argument for impartial British news service is stronger than ever. And where mistakes are made, they do need to get their house in order, and the BBC must uphold the highest standards, be accountable and correct errors quickly. But I will always stand up for a strong, independent BBC.
David.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is right that the BBC's independence and impartiality are absolutely crucial. That's why we must stop President Trump from undermining them. But President Trump's not the only one, Mr. Speaker. The last government spent years undermining the BBC's independence and impartiality. They put 2 Conservative cronies on the BBC board. One has had to resign, the other's still there, but he's been repeatedly accused of interfering in editorial decisions and staff appointments. Robbie Gibbs should have no role in appointing the next Director General. And given the Royal Charter gives the government the power to remove him, will the Prime Minister sack him now?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I certainly agree with the comment that the last government undermined the work of the BBC. They undermined pretty well everything they did in 14 years. Mr. Speaker, I'm not going to go into the individual runnings of the BBC. I am a strong supporter of the BBC in the terms I've already set out.
Don't puffy.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, this is Care Leavers Month, when we remember the resilience and the brilliance of our young people who have grown up in care. And I was delighted to welcome a group of Southampton's care leavers to share their views with the Minister recently. But while this Labour government is taking real action to support care leavers, a Reform councillor has disgracefully described children in care as downright evil. Will the Prime Minister... He said it. Will the Prime Minister, and I hope the whole House, join me in condemning Reform's vile rhetoric, and will he reassure us that this Labour government will continue to support the protections and opportunities for all our care leavers?
Well, Mr. Speaker, November marks the first ever Care Leavers Month, and that is a time to recognise that every child deserves support to achieve their potential. And through our landmark Children's Wellbeing Bill, we're requiring every local authority to help care leavers find secure accommodation. It saddens me that the parties opposite voted against it. The comments about children in care being evil are utterly appalling. And now the member for Clacton has heard them. I'm sure he'll want to condemn them right now.
Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. No, I've only got 30 seconds. The Prime Minister has stated very clearly that he wants to close the migrant hotels by the end of this Parliament. Well, the Reform-led West Northamptonshire Council, brilliantly led council, will be issuing foreclosure notices on 3 migrant hotels within the next few days in response to grave public concern about the safety of women and girls on the streets of West Northamptonshire. Would the Prime Minister approve of us speeding up the closure of the migrant hotels?
Mr. Speaker, we will grit the mesh we inherited and close every hotel. At their peak, under the previous government, there were 400 hotels. Now there are only 200 remaining. But he says he doesn't have time to condemn the comments calling children in care evil. He's also not had the time, it appears, to condemn the racist comments of his own MP. Utterly spineless.
Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week I visited the new diagnostic centre at Withington Community Hospital, and as well as the 85,000 new appointments it's going to create, I was really pleased to see the new solar panels and heat pumps being designed into the building. So in the week of COP, and can I thank the Prime Minister for his climate leadership and attending COP, in the week of COP, what more can we do to ensure that new public buildings have green energy designed into them?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I was very proud to attend COP last week, and the UK is leading on tackling climate change, delivering energy security and getting bills down and generating hundreds of jobs across the country. We're investing over £250 million to put rooftop solar on schools, hospital and military sites across the country, and that will deliver £400 million of savings to renew our public services.
Angus MacDonald.
Prime Minister, successive governments imposed massive environmental tariffs on customers using UK-produced renewable electricity, but far less on imported carbon fuel mains gas. This is the main reason why those not on the gas grid, i.e. those living in rural Britain, pay a great deal more to heat their properties. Yes, renewable projects are important, but the huge environmental tariffs on our electricity bills are not fair. Would the Prime Minister acknowledge this injustice and commit his government to addressing this? Thank you.
Can I absolutely recognise the need to address the imbalance between electricity and gas prices? We are exploring options to create a fairer system, and I'm happy for ministers to keep him updated on what we're looking at. It's thanks to those levies and Labour's expansion of the warm homes discount that 6 million families will be getting £150 off their energy bills this winter. And I know that he will welcome the £33 billion in investment from SSE, helping connect clean energy to areas across Scotland where it's most needed.
Lindsay Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prior to the general election, the Health Secretary visited Amber Valley and declared it an NHS dentistry desert. Since then, I've secured £240,000 of additional funding, encouraged my constituents to access the 16,300 emergency appointments in Derbyshire, and last week secured thousands of extra UDAs. But there is more to do. So can the Prime Minister update me on the progress of the contract negotiations with the BDA and the timescale that the department is working to?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm appalled that we inherited such a situation where tooth decay is the most common reason where children between 5 and 9 are admitted to hospital. Every children's hospital under their watch, going in 5 to 9. I was very shocked when I heard this the first time at Alderhay Hospital up in the northwest, that more children being admitted to have their teeth taken out because they're rotting between the ages of 5 to 9 than any other operation. That was their record. They should just be ashamed of it. Ashamed of it. It's why I'm determined to rebuild NHS dentistry. I can confirm that discussions are underway with the sector, including the British Dental Association, on fundamental reform to the dental contract to get her constituents the care that they need and that they deserve.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Jehoot's pharmacy has been responsible for repeated closures, leaving staff unpaid and residents without access to vital medicine. Unfit pharmacy owners like Sargit Jehooti, who has severely neglected patients and staff in West Dorset and across England, should not be running our care system. Will the Prime Minister make time in the parliamentary schedule for emergency legislation to give the government and the regulators powers to pay staff, tackle improper pharmacy owners and directors, and make sure scandals like this can never happen again?
Can I thank him for raising this really serious issue, which has been raised by others across these benches on previous occasions, and it is a very serious issue. It is simply not right that customers and staff have been so badly let down. The Care Minister has convened representatives from across the industry to resolve the situation as quickly as possible, and I want to reassure him that we're working speedily to consider how to strengthen regulation of these pharmacies, and I'll update the House as soon as I can.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. During the assisted dying debates, I and many others highlighted the importance of palliative care provided by hospices, but this vital work has been left reliant on donations and charity for far too long, and Garden House Hospice in Letchworth is now facing a serious funding gap. I welcome government investment in hospices, but will the Prime Minister consider broader reform to put hospice funding on a sustainable footing? And can he ensure ministers meet with me to explore every option to keep Garden House Hospice open?
I'm pleased to tell him that £100 million has now been passed to Hospice UK, so places like Garden House in his constituency can create the best environment to deliver care. That's backed, Mr. Speaker, by £26 million investment for children and young people's hospices. We're also investing over £3 million in researching palliative and end-of-life care through the National Institute for Health and Care Research. We're working on further proposals to improve the access, quality and sustainability of care, and I'll make sure that ministers keep him updated.
Rebecca Paul.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to ask the Prime Minister for his help. It's been over 6 months since the Supreme Court ruling on the meaning of sex, yet public institutions are still knowingly and intentionally breaching the law. HMP Downview, a women's prison in Banstead, has 5 biological males in it. And if that wasn't bad enough, those males are mixing with the women in the daytime without adequate supervision. Will the Prime Minister ensure biological males are moved out of women's prisons immediately?
The Supreme Court ruling must be implemented in full and at all levels. She's absolutely right about that. She's raised these examples with me. I will make sure they're looked into and make sure she gets a proper reply in relation to the particular examples.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With miles of golden sand and a bucket full of memories, Rhyl has been attracting visitors for generations. After millions of pounds of Welsh Government investment and a £20 million UK Government Neighbourhood Fund, RIL is on the up. Yeah. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that only with two Labour governments working together can we restore pride in our Welsh seaside towns? Yeah. Join me for a stroll on our new promenade to see just what RIL has to offer. Yeah.
Well, that's a very appealing invitation just at the moment. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to be putting power and resources directly back in the hands of local people in communities like RIL. That £20 million can be used for issues that matter most to them, include revitalising their high street, a cause that I know is crucial to many residents, including hers. Just 1 in 14 communities across Wales is benefiting from the Pride in Place funding. This is the renewal you get with a Labour government working with a Labour government in Cardiff.
Max Wilkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Maternity services are a vital part of women's healthcare, but sadly too many women are being failed. At Cheltenham General Hospital, the Evita Birth Centre was temporarily closed for labour and births back in 2022. Last week, we learned that there will be no decision about a potential plan for reopening it until spring next year. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that 4 years is far too long to ask local mums-to-be to wait? And can he give me reassurance that a temporary downgrade that was made under the Conservatives will not become permanent under his government?
Yeah. I tell him that our starting point is that we must always make sure that every mother is heard, understood and gets the quality of care that is needed. The Independent National Maternity Investigation and Local Health Needs Assessment are due to report in spring of next year, as he says. It's right that the recommendations of both of them are closely considered in any decision for Cheltenham, and I'll make sure that he's kept updated as that rolls out.
Jim Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I say that I've long thought that both you and the Prime Minister would suit a magnificent moustache, and I'm sure you'd be capable of growing a better one than this. Many of us men in this House and outside are growing our tash out this month to highlight the need for our health system and men ourselves to address preventable and treatable conditions to which all men are vulnerable, including prostate cancer, testicular cancer and mental health conditions such as depression. Does the Prime Minister agree that the forthcoming first ever men's health strategy, soon to be published, must lead to a major step change in the way our country helps men stay well?
Well, as he knows, my #1 priority is growth, so I'm very glad to see his upper lip. He's obviously championing this himself. And can I send my best wishes to everyone growing a moustache this Movember? It is right, Mr. Speaker, to highlight that men are hit harder by a range of conditions, including cancer, cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. And that's why our men's health strategy will set out actions to improve the health of all men in England.
Rupert Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every week, we hear of a brutal murder, rape or stabbing, far too often perpetrated by someone who should not be in our country to begin with. Does the Prime Minister agree that for cases where the guilt is so undeniable, the crime so monstrous, the evil so irredeemable, the reintroduction of the death penalty for both foreign and domestic criminals should be put to the British people in a legally binding referendum?
Can I first say that any attack is to be condemned, and it is absolutely right, and we're determined that there is a criminal justice response in relation to attack, however it's carried out and whoever it's carried out by. But reintroducing the death penalty is not the answer to this. It didn't work when it was in place. It led to the death of those that, in fact, turned out were innocent. But what we must do is improve, as we are, the criminal justice response in this country.
Kemi Badenoch.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to pay tribute to a new veterans group in Stevenage called the Muster Point, founded by Stuart Mendelsohn and Steve Black. Last week, I joined them at a continuous 72-hour vigil at Stevenage War Memorial, where veterans shared stories of family and friends lost in war. But veterans deserve more than just our tributes. So will the Prime Minister commit to working with veterans in Stevenage and across the UK in delivering this government's new veteran strategy in full?
One of the greatest honours in this role is meeting and thanking our armed forces for their service, which obviously we've been able to do during the course of this weekend and this week. Our ambition is to bring the Armed Forces Covenant fully into law in the next Armed Forces Bill, and we will do so. We're also renewing the contract with those who serve through our veterans strategy, including Homes for Heroes, a new network of support centres connecting charities and services with veterans. And Labour Patriots stand with all those who serve and have served our country.
Stuart Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And on that point, with the upcoming vote on the Northern Ireland Troubles Bill, 9 of the most respected and experienced generals of a generation have publicly attacked the government's approach on lawfare against our armed forces. They have said it will erode trust in the justice system and it is a threat to national security. As a veteran who served in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, does the Prime Minister think they're all wrong? And when is he actually going to start standing up for our veterans?
Can I begin by thanking him for his service to our country? And when former service chiefs raise an issue, we will, of course, engage with them. Of course, I respect their service and their views, and will do so. We are having to get rid of unlawful legislation and putting in place a system with clear rights and protections for veterans, and we'll continue to try to get that balance right.
Anderson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. 4 years ago, I brought in a private member's bill to ban the sale of wet wipes with plastic in. The last government dragged its feet. These wet wipes cause fatbergs in our sewers and millions of pounds on our water bills for all of our constituents and pollute rivers and seas. This government promised to bring in this ban and is doing so now. Will the Prime Minister join with me on celebrating a Labour promise delivered and share the message that we should always bin wet wipes and other wipes, not flush them?
Well, can I commend her? She's been a long-standing campaigner on this important issue, and the public is right to be furious about how the last government allowed sewage to pour into our lakes, rivers and seas. Alongside tough new powers to combat pollution, this ban will put an end to plastic wet wipes that litter our beaches, clog up our sewers and harm wildlife.
David Chadwick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Lloyds Bank have over 31,000 customers in my constituency, and yet many of those customers, particularly the elderly and the vulnerable, are struggling to get out their own cash. That's because Lloyds have closed their branches in Brecon, in Prestine, in Ustragunlais, and before the end of this month, in Pontedower. That's despite making billions in profits and paying their CEO £5 million. Will the Prime Minister write to Lloyds Bank and ask them to keep that last branch in Pontedower open?
Well, I'm grateful to him for raising that, and I'll look at the particular example that he's raised. As he will know, we're rolling out hubs, some of them already in place and more to come, and I'll happily update him on where they're likely to be.
Final question, Richard Quidley.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following the work of our APPG for eating disorders, I was horrified to hear that 19-year-old Lily Cliff, who suffers from anorexia, has been placed on an end-of-life care pathway after Rotherham, Doncaster and South Humber NHS Foundation Trust obtained a Court of Protection ruling to withdraw her treatment. This decision directly contradicts NICE guidelines and the Minister for Care's own statement in September that eating disorders are not a terminal illness. Will the Prime Minister urgently review this case to ensure that Lily and her family receive the support they need and that Lily is given every possible chance to recover and live, and remind all ICBs, NHS and hospitals that suffering from an eating disorder is not a terminal illness?
Well, first, my thoughts are with Lily and her family, and the details he raises are really deeply concerning. I know he's raised this with health ministers, and I'll make sure he gets a swift response. He is a powerful advocate for change, and I share his determination that everyone with an eating disorder gets the care and the support that they need.
Let the front benches change over. We now come to the urgent question. Louis French.
To ask the Secretary of State if she will make a statement on the appointment of the independent football regulator.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In 2021, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson set up the fan-led review of football and selected Dame Tracy Crouch to chair it. This led to a clear recommendation for an independent football regulator, which was strongly endorsed on all sides of this House. The previous government promised they would deliver this regulator, but they didn't, leaving fans in the lurch as a result. This government made it a priority and passed that legislation within our first year because we are fully committed to protecting football clubs across the country. To make that a reality, the Minister for Sport confirmed David Cogan as the independent chair of the football regulator on the 6th of October. David Cogan was the exceptional candidate, warmly endorsed across the world of football and by the cross-party select committee. As the House will be aware, the Commissioner for Public Appointments conducted an investigation into the appointment itself, which was released last week. I am pleased that the report does not question the suitability of Mr Cogan as chair of the IFR. The report also makes clear that I did not personally know about the donations to my leadership campaign at the time that I selected him as the preferred candidate. It also recognises that as soon as I became aware of these donations, I chose to declare them and chose to recuse myself from the remainder of the process. However, as I have made clear, I acknowledge the findings of the report. The Commissioner was clear that the breach around donations to my campaign was unknowing, but I recognise that the highest standards were not met. And as the Secretary of State for the department that ran this appointment, I take full responsibility for that. And it is for that reason that I wrote to the Prime Minister and apologised for this error. I will, of course, ensure that lessons are learned from this process with my department. Our focus now is to make sure that no fan ever has to go through what I and my constituents lived through in Wigan. Implementing this regime to help protect clubs in financial peril and putting the interests of fans up and down the country first is a priority for this government, and led by David Cogan, the independent football regulator, will get on with the job. We're here today debating process, but this is also about real-world impact. Fans up and down the country need us to get on with delivering on our promise and making a difference. This is for Derby County, Scunthorpe United, for Morecambe, for Sheffield Wednesday, for Wigan, Reading, Macclesfield Town and Bury. We're putting fans back at the heart of the game, where they belong.
French.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Last Thursday, the Commissioner for Public Appointments published his report into the appointment of the chair of the independent football regulator. The report found that the Secretary of State breached the governance code for public appointments updated by her government not once, not twice, 3 times. The Secretary of State has claimed that she did not know about Mr Cogan's donations, but the Commissioner's report clearly shows that she was briefed twice by her department regarding his conflicts before she decided to appoint him to a role that must be independent. The report also makes clear that Mr Cogan was not shortlisted by the previous government, and it was this government that put him in the running. It was not until the Secretary of State had already recommended his appointment and the night before Mr Cogan's appearance before the Select Committee on the 7th of May did she conveniently consider checking if she had also taken thousands of pounds off of him. Madam Deputy Speaker, I find that highly unlikely, and the Commissioner makes it clear that she was in a position to readily ascertain the details of donations made by Mr Cogan before she made her choice, but she failed to do so. It was then after the political fallout and 6 days later she finally recused herself from the end of the process. And to show how brazen this crony appointment was, her department confirmed it while the independent investigation was still taking place. Really shameful stuff, Madam Deputy Speaker. This was not a fair and open recruitment process. The report confirms that Mr Cogan was her preferred candidate, subject to number 10 giving the green light, and asked for DCMS officials to make the necessary arrangements for an appointment without competition. Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister's fingerprints are also clear from the Commissioner's report. We understand that Mr Cogan donated to the Prime Minister's constituency Labour Party as well as to his leadership campaign. I almost feel sorry for the Secretary of State. She has apologised to the Prime Minister for 3 breaches of the rules for choosing his candidate. So how is it proper for the Prime Minister to have personally given the green light to a donor? Surely, Madam Deputy Speaker, if the Secretary of State was meant to have been recused from this 2020 donation, Mr Cogan, that must apply to the Prime Minister too. Or does the Prime Minister believe that the offside rules did not apply to him? So I ask the Secretary of State, who is to blame for this sorry mess? How much did Mr Cogan give to the Prime Minister, and did he declare it? And does she agree that Mr Cogan's deeply flawed appointment must be rescinded given the risks of football? And finally, will she stick by her words that rule breakers cannot be rule makers?
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'll try and answer his questions in turn. But firstly, can I just say that this was a report, a process that was subject to a thorough investigation by the Independent Commissioner for Public Appointments. And I think when he questions the findings of that report, he should reflect on whether that is a proper role of this House or not. The report was absolutely crystal clear on that point. It was also clear, in contrast to what he just asserted, that I personally fell short of what was expected. On one occasion, there were 2 other technical breaches from the department, but of course, as the Secretary of State for the Department for Culture, Media and Sport, I will take full responsibility for that. He also asked about the Prime Minister. As he will know, if he's read the report, I personally took the decision to ask Mr Cogan to put that information in front of the Select Committee at his hearing in order to ensure that they had full information as soon as I had it, within hours of finding out about this donation. And he was open and transparent about the fact that he had donated to both my campaign and the Prime Minister's campaign. But I have to say to him, I am the Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport. It is my department that ran this process, and it is for me to take full responsibility for it. Secondly, he asserts that Mr Cogan was not part of the process. I find that astonishing, and I presume at some point he'll come back to correct the record on that, because when he speaks to his colleagues, one of whom is sitting on the front bench and was overseeing that process before the general election at a time when this government was proudly extolling the virtues of having a football regulator and the Governance Act that they later opposed, he will know that Mr Cogan was approached for this job under the last Conservative government, and he was put onto the list which I inherited from the last government. And I just want to be crystal clear on this point. He was not added to the list after the general election. He was on the list from the last Conservative government. And can I just ask him, he talks about cronies. He is talking about a man. I mean, they can shunter all they like, but he's talking about a man who has extensive media experience, who represented the Premier League, the EFL, the NFL and others throughout his long and distinguished career. He was put on the list in the full knowledge that he was a Labour donor by the last government. And not only that, but if he's such a crony who's unfit to hold this sort of office, why on earth did the former Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, appoint him to the board of Channel 4? I mean, it just doesn't stack up. So good, you approached him yourselves. And just finally, I would just say to the honourable gentleman that, of course, I'm happy to answer extensive questions about this, and that is the reason why I've chosen to come to the House and answer these questions, despite the fact that it was the Minister for Sport who made the final decision. But I'd just say to him, as a Charlton fan himself, I am a bit surprised that, given their experience of bad owners, that he is setting himself and his party against football fans in his constituency and the length and breadth of the country by trying to attack a man whose credentials are unquestioned.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I say to my right honourable friend, in the terrible time that Sheffield Wednesday fans have been through in the last few months, not one has ever asked me what's happening to this report and this review. What they've said to me is, how quickly can we get a regulator in place who will deal with owners like Chansiri who are ruining our club? And would she agree with me that what we have now in the appointment of David Cogan, who is knowledgeable, tough, determined and independent of bad football owners, and going to act on behalf of football fans? And isn't the fundamental difference here between those of us on this side who support regulation, independent regulation, and those on that side who've given up on it and are going to simply kowtow to bad owners in football clubs?
Can I thank him for that, because, as always, he has taken this debate back to the people who most matter, and they are the fans that have been through hell over recent years as the last government committed to act and then dragged their feet and then refused to fulfil the promise to their fans. It was shameful to see them go through the division lobbies to vote against their own bill, but I do want to put on record my thanks to Dame Tracy Crouch for all the work that she did and continues to do to uphold that promise. And can I also thank him sincerely? He and I have had numerous conversations over the course of the saga that's developed at Sheffield Wednesday. I know how active he's been, and that is the approach that this government will always take. We will not stand by and let football fans pay the price when bad owners take over their clubs. We're putting them back at the heart of the game where they belong.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Anna Sabine.
Deputy Speaker, the Lib Dems have welcomed the introduction of the new independent football regulator. Our football clubs are huge historic institutions that unite generations, bring local economies to life and inspire millions both at home and abroad. And so the Secretary of State carries a significant responsibility to earn the confidence of our world-leading football clubs and to guide them through the introduction of these vital regulatory reforms. But the news that she broke the governance code by failing to declare donations received from the newly appointed head of the regulator, David Cogan, in a timely manner has undermined trust at a crucial moment. This regulator is about securing the future of our national game, ensuring that clubs remain sustainable, rooted in their communities and capable of thriving for generations to come. She cannot shy away from the potential conflict of interest and breaches of the code which have emerged in recent days. This oversight requires genuine accountability from the government in order to restore confidence in the new regulator. Will she therefore commit to order an independent investigation into the appointment of David Cogan and, if necessary, rerun the selection process for the IFR chair?
Madam Deputy Speaker, all the way through this process I have complied fully with the Independent Commissioner because I believe that that is important, and in contrast to the last government who broke not just the Public Appointments Code but the Ministerial Code, had multiple members of their side who did so. They've still got a member of the front bench who broke the ministerial code and now sits on their front bench as the shadow Foreign Secretary. Unlike them, we comply with these processes and we accept the consequences. But can I just say to the Honourable Lady, there's been an independent investigation. It's been going on for 6 months. I don't know how she's missed it. That's what we're discussing today. And can I say too that she just said to me that we need to earn the trust of the footballing world. Now, over the course of the Football Governance Act, as honourable members opposite will well know when they were supporting this piece of legislation, there were numerous people who were concerned about the appointment of anybody to take on this role. One of them was Karen Brady, a very distinguished member of the House of Lords with extensive experience in football. Recently, she said David Cogan has dealt with the EFL UEFA for the women's game and international bodies. That matters because football isn't just about the elite, it's a pyramid, and if the top crumbles, the base cracks with it. And more importantly, he's worked in governance roles that demand accountability. If you want any further evidence of the confidence that this appointment, that David Cogan is commanding across the footballing world, it's that the staunchest critics of the government's approach to implementing a football regulator in the first place have come out strongly in support of the man who is already cracking on with putting football fans back at the heart of the game.
Clive Efford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My friend agreed with me that when Tracy Crouch was appointed to lead the review of football governance, there was no opposition from this side. There was no opposition from the fans that a Conservative was going to lead that review. There was cooperation right across this House. When it was expedient for them, the Conservatives supported the fan-led review. And now, when the bill has been put before Parliament, when things got to push to shove, they just opposed it. They're using it as a political football. But the football fans, does she agree with me that the football fans don't give a damn about this Westminster bubble argument? What they want is a regulator that's going to be on their side.
Yeah. Can I thank my honourable friend for the years of work that he's put into making sure that we got to this point. And particularly, can I personally thank him because when my club, Wigan Athletic, was in trouble not once but twice, he and other members of the select committee couldn't have been more supportive to us in making sure that we got the right outcome and saved our club, and I do want to thank him. Can I say too that I would actually like to thank the honourable member opposite, because even though he has latterly decided that this is a terrible appointment and that this Football Governance Act is a terrible thing, a couple of years ago he said to the honourable member who was at the time the Sports Minister, following years of misery and uncertainty for fans at local clubs such as Charlton Athletic, I welcome the news of an independent football regulator. Will the Minister assure my constituents that the regulator will have sufficient powers to deal with regulatory breaches and strengthen those ownership tests? Well, I'm not sure if the Minister at the time could give an answer, but I'm happy to say that we certainly will.
Chair of the Select Committee, Dame Caroline Diney.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Look, I want the independent regulator to succeed, not least because of clubs like mine, Portsmouth Football Club, whose fans had to step in and buy the club after 2 administrations. But we need transparency and trust in public appointments. Now, the Secretary of State has repeatedly said that the DCMS Select Committee found Mr Cogan appointable, and that is correct. We did so under the remit that we were asked to work with. However, we did so taking the unprecedented step of including a recommendation of the need for concrete steps to reassure the football community of his neutrality. Because it was Mr Cogan, not the department and not the Minister, who told the Select Committee at the very meeting to decide whether he was appointable or not about the donations. So can I just say, or can I just ask the Secretary of State, the Commissioner's report points to a wider issue with the department's public appointments process. And of the last 10 public appointments that involve parliamentary scrutiny, all but one of them has had problems with the candidate or the process at some point with DCMS. These are undermining the organisations and the people who are picked to lead them. So can I ask the Secretary of State, does she accept the department must do better at public appointments? And can I ask her what concrete steps they're taking to achieve this?
Well, look, can I thank her for that? And I do very much agree with her that it's absolutely essential that the public can have confidence in the public appointments that we make, not least because of the very many debacles that we saw under the last government. And that was why I personally requested that Mr Cogan made that information available to the Select Committee within hours of being notified of it myself, so that the Select Committee had that information. She's also absolutely right to say that the committee made a recommendation to Mr Cogan that he must take steps to ensure that he was independent of government. I heard that, although that wasn't a recommendation aimed at me as the Secretary of State, I heard that loud and clear, and it was one of the reasons why I was very quick to recuse myself from that process and take no further decisions in it. She's absolutely right to say, and she's raised with myself and the Permanent Secretary the occasions on which the department has fallen short. We do take that very seriously. We've committed to coming back to her with a full list of concrete actions that we're taking. I would say, and this is not to make excuses because it is my responsibility to make sure that we get this right, but DCMS is responsible for the vast majority of public appointments. I think we make nearly 50% of all public appointments across government. That is even more reason why we need to make sure that we have the proper processes in place to get that right, and we are looking at that the moment, and we'll come back to her very quickly on that. Can I also just take this opportunity to thank her constituents, because when we were in trouble at Wigan Athletic, I remember Portsmouth fans jumping on a Zoom call with us at very short notice. They couldn't have been more supportive in giving us advice and guidance to help us pull through that difficult time. I remember that time as if it was yesterday. The amount of pain that we were going through and anxiety, the footballing world was there for us, and my commitment to her constituents and all of our constituents across the House is that this government will also be there for them too.
Jeff Smith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, we now have an excellent, highly qualified individual appointed as the football regulator. We have an excellent Secretary of State who made a mistake for which she has apologised, and even the Commissioner said the breach of the code was not a knowing breach. What football fans want is not this debate in Parliament today. What football fans want is her to get on with the job, to protect clubs, to protect supporters. Can I encourage her to ignore the opposition playing politics with our national game and just get on with the job?
Can I thank him for that, and also very much welcome his joining the Culture, Media and Sports Select Committee. He has extensive knowledge of football and has been a consistent champion for football fans. And can I just say to him that I very much support what he said. This government is absolutely determined to appoint the right people to the right positions so that fans, when they go through the difficulties of poor owners, as they did at Charlton, don't feel that they have absolutely nowhere to turn.
Father of the House, Sir Edward Lee.
It's not my style to ever attack the integrity of any Member of Parliament. So can I just ask a general question about the whole process to ensure public confidence? Can we now consider tightening the ministerial code and the whole process so that at the start of a process, civil servants do check whether a minister has received any donations, and if they have, that minister recuses himself or herself from the very start of the process?
Yes, and of course he's absolutely right to say that we need the tightest possible processes. It's why the Prime Minister took steps when he was first elected as Prime Minister to strengthen the ministerial code and also strengthen the oversight powers that the Commissioner has in relation to the ministerial code, the Standards Commissioner, Sir Laurie Magnus. But can I say to him that in this particular case, as the report makes clear, I did ask for information about all donations to my leadership campaign. I was given that information. That information turned out to be incomplete, and as soon as I was notified that that was the case, I took the decision to declare that, to ensure the Select Committee was aware of it, and to recuse myself from the process.
Julie Minns.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Does the Secretary of State agree with me that rather than obstructing and delaying the work of the Independent Football Regulator, that the party opposite needs to do right by the fans and let David Cogan get on with the job? And can I ask, slightly selfishly, as a Carlisle United fan, that one of the first things he does is that he presses the EFL to lift the limit on the number of promotion places from the National League?
Can I thank her for that? And I know she's a fantastic champion for her constituents, and this is something they care about. I've also, myself and the Sports Minister, have heard the strength of feeling from the National League as well. It's not within the scope of the Independent Football Regulator. The House will remember that we kept the remit of the Independent Football Regulator deliberately tight so that he could focus on the very many issues that have been raised, not least by my honourable friend who represents Sheffield Heeley. But although it's not in scope for the Independent Football Regulator, I know that this has been heard by the EFL, and it's something that the government will continue to follow closely.
Sir Oliver Dowden.
I like and respect the Right Honourable Lady, and I don't doubt her sincerity. However, I do wonder whether she would have been quite so forgiving had I chosen to appoint a Tory donor to lead this regulatory body. But moreover, I supported this regulator, indeed initiated it at the time of the risk of the European Super League. But since then, I fear this regulator has become excessively bureaucratic. It risks deterring international investment and more broad investment into the game, which has been so beneficial to the sport. So does she think it might be time to relook at this regulator and instead put more emphasis on self-governance from football? Because I think in recent years, they have shown themselves capable of stepping up to this challenge.
Well, can I thank him for that, and can I say thank him for the tone that he takes? But I have to say to him that if he doesn't think that David Cogan was fit to be considered because he was a Labour donor, then his party shouldn't have put him on the list, knowing full well that he was a Labour donor, or indeed appointed him to the board of Channel 4. I mean, I appreciate it's inconvenient for the opposite side, but that is, I'm afraid, just the facts of the matter. He says, is it time to reconsider the Independent Football Regulator? Football fans have been made a promise in 2021 that the last government would act on the very many problems that we'd seen in football clubs across the country. 2021, they had to wait until a Labour government in order to make good on that promise. And in October of this year, the Minister for Sport was able to confirm that Mr Cogan was appointed and that we would start that work immediately. He's had a few weeks to get on with the job, and he's already achieved more in that time than the last Conservative government achieved in 14 years.
Ian Lavery.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. You know, the Football Governance Bill it's an excellent bill. It really was driven forward through this place by the Tory government. And at the very last minute, at third reading, they decided to oppose the bill. I mean, absolutely horrendous behaviour. And it's worth wondering why indeed that was the case. However, can I ask my right honourable friend, on the issue of the appointment of the individual, Mr Corgan, it's been said in many places that Mr Corgan was on a list. He had been approached by the Conservative government to take up the position which he was offered by the Labour government in office. What evidence have the Labour government got to prove that that actually was the case?
Well, I can confirm that he was on the list that was held by the department, and there are obviously records of that. I was also presented with that list when I took up this post in the summer of 2024. And it wasn't just that Mr Cogan was on that list, having been approached under a Conservative government in order to be considered for the job. The approach was made from the government to Mr Cogan. It was also that he was appointed to the board of Channel 4 by the last Conservative government, so they're obviously well aware of his credentials for the job. And I do just want to take this opportunity, since he mentioned it, to thank Dame Tracy Crouch for the work that she has done. It just, you know, I was reflecting recently how far the opposition has fallen from the days when they had members of Parliament like Dame Tracy Crouch who could command the respect of the whole House.
Liz Jarvis.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. During the Select Committee pre-appointment hearing with David Cogan, I raised the issue of whether or not his appointment would be construed with political bias. Does the Secretary of State accept that appointing a known Labour donor to lead an independent regulator has created exactly the perception of political bias I warned about during the Select Committee pre-appointment hearing?
As I've made clear, he was approached under the last government and he's eminently qualified for the job. As soon as I knew about the donations, of course, I chose to declare them and recuse myself and played no further part in the process. But I have a responsibility to football fans, the length and breadth of this country, to appoint the right person to this job. And there is no question that David Cogan was the outstanding candidate, as he's already proving, having wasted no time in getting on with the job.
Conor Rand.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And the Shadow Minister spoke of risks to football in his remarks. I think we need to be really clear that the only risk to brilliant grassroots local community football clubs like Altrincham FC is the party opposite's constant attempts to oppose and obstruct an independent football regulator. But does the Secretary of State agree with me that having taken on board the findings of the investigation and taken responsibility, it is unedifying to watch the opposition front bench use this as another opportunity to try and obstruct an independent football regulator and stand against the best interests of the game?
Can I thank him for that, and thank you for being such a fantastic champion for his constituencies. It was a pleasure to meet some of them when I came to the Honourable Gentleman's constituency not that long ago. And can I just agree with him that the party opposite appears to have no respect for football fans, no respect for independent processes, and no respect even for their own manifesto that was crystal clear that they supported this act.
Sir Gavin Williamson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can the Secretary of State confirm whether the Prime Minister or anyone acting on his authority declared his conflict of interest before they asked for Mr Cogan's withdrawn application be reinstated? And if it was declared, who was it declared by and when was it declared by?
I think I've answered that question. I've been absolutely crystal clear. It is my department that appoints the candidate for the independent football regulator. I was responsible for this process. I take full responsibility for it, and just to be absolutely crystal clear, because honourable members don't seem to be listening and seem to be asking the same thing, I recused myself from the process. So it's the Minister for Sport who ultimately made the appointment decision, but I am the responsible Secretary of State for the process as a whole.
Amanda Martin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and may I draw the House's attention to my register of interest. Madam Deputy Speaker, whilst this government is focused on finally delivering for fans and security the future of our national game, the record of the party opposite tells a very different story. We've seen Conservative donors and insiders appointed across the board for years to the NHS, to the UK Health Security, to the British Museum as well as major donor peers and the opening of COVID VIP lanes for their pals. It's the same old question, Madam Deputy Speaker, the one Margaret Thatcher famously asked, is he one of ours? Football fans don't care who's one of theirs, they care about saving their clubs and having a regulator who is going to do that. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that David Cogan, as chair of the Independent Football Regulator, chose on experience and merit, not party loyalty, is finally putting fans first and protecting our beautiful game?
Can I thank her for that, and thank her for all the work that she's done to support football fans for very many years, even before being elected to this place. One of the things that I completely accept that there are appointments that will be made under any government that involve people who've made political donations. By definition, those people will want to be involved in public life. And I have never criticised the other side for making appointments on that basis. Where I have criticised the other side is where there is a dispute, a strong dispute, about whether those candidates have any qualifications for the job. There is no dispute in the case of David Cogan, and where I have particularly criticised the other side is where they're not prepared to comply with and respect independent processes. That is the difference between us and them. The Independent Public Appointments Commissioner decided to open an inquiry into what had happened during this process, complied fully with that process throughout, and I've accepted the consequences.
Shaukat Adam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I, like all other like-minded football fans, welcome the appointment of an independent regulator. It was much needed. Indeed, I'm not even questioning the merit of the individual that has been appointed. But the issue is this: the Minister, by her own admission, forgot that she was given money by the new independent regulator before they were appointed, alongside the £33,410 given to the Labour Party over the past 5 years. And given what the Minister has just said, she has previously called the Tories out for double standards, said Boris Johnson trashed the UK's global reputation, and called for the Tories to come clean for so many years. Should she not now take her own reputation rather than joining the sleazy ranks?
Well, can I just, it's difficult to know where to start with the number of inaccuracies in that statement, but let me have a go. First of all, I didn't forget to declare the donations. If he'd read the report, which he obviously hasn't, the Independent Commissioner was convinced that I did not know about these donations, and that as soon as I did know about these donations, I chose to declare them, and I recused myself from that process, so perhaps he might want to reflect on that. Secondly, the quote that he mentions about Boris Johnson, I think, was in relation to the abolition of the Department for International Development, so perhaps he might want to go and check that as well. And can I just say to him as well, I've heard quite a few comments from him recently on social media and elsewhere about the accuracy of things that are said at this dispatch box. I absolutely stand by that, and I think next time he comes to this House, he might want to do a bit of homework first.
James Wilde.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. I have to say I am quite surprised at the lack of contrition from the Secretary of State, given what is a very damning report. In November 2024, Mr Cogan withdrew from the application process because he said there was a lot of noise about Labour donors. But then in March, in a move that the Commissioner said was highly unusual, his candidacy was reinstated, he was rapidly sifted, interviewed and appointed. Are the public really expected to believe this was an open and fair process when the decision-makers took donations from the candidate?
I think, again, you should have more respect for the independence of these processes. The Independent Commissioner on Public Appointments investigated this thoroughly and found that the breach of the code was unknowing, but nevertheless I've taken full responsibility for it. And I have to say it takes some brass neck from a party who sit on benches with a shadow Foreign Secretary who, when she was in government, broke the ministerial code, was told to resign, refused to do so, and now sits as one of their most senior ministers.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. First of all, can I welcome the Secretary of State's comments. The Secretary of State is an honourable lady, and I know that, and I hope that everybody in this chamber knows that as well. I very much welcome the independent football regulator, but my constituents have asked me to ask a question, so I asked that question on behalf of them. That's my job to do so. Yesterday it was the BBC, today it's the football regulator appointment. The general public are sceptical of appointments which to them may breach public appointments code. Secretary of State, confidence from the general public is truly at an all-time low. So how can the Secretary of State ensure that any jobs are fit for purpose, that neither political affiliation or support will never be a material consideration for any appointments. Thank you so much.
Can I thank him for that? And I think that is the reason why the Prime Minister has made clear, and the Cabinet strongly believes, that although mistakes will always be made, when those mistakes are made, we have to comply fully, openly with independent processes. We have to respect those processes, and we have to accept the consequences. He will note that in the report that was written and published by the Independent Public Appointments Commissioner, there wasn't a single recommendation made to me as part of that. There were recommendations for the department, but there wasn't a recommendation in relation to me. Nevertheless, I've chosen to apologise to the Prime Minister, because I believe that's the right thing to do, to take responsibility for the things that we are responsible for. He mentions the BBC yesterday. I imagine that he's alluding to an issue that was raised by many members of this House about the political appointments that were made to the board, and the appointment of one board member in particular that has been highlighted by many members of being of concern. He will know that they were appointments that were made under the last Conservative government. The last Conservative government also chose to extend the term of the board member in question just a few weeks before calling a general election, so he is now in post for several years. But there is an opportunity to look at this through the upcoming Charter Review, and I can assure him that we will.
Kieran Mullen.
Thank you. Can I thank the Secretary of State for explaining. I'm sure people have been glad to hear the involvement of a sponsoring department, a sponsoring minister in a public appointment. So in answer to my question, she need not revisit her role. We all understand that. She's explained it clearly. But she'll also know it's not unusual after a Secretary of State's made a provisional appointment that it then goes on to number 10 for further review. So can she just confirm, putting aside her own role, was there any involvement in any way, shape or form with anybody in number 10 for this appointment?
I'm happy to clarify, this was not a Prime Ministerial appointment. This was an appointment made by the Culture, Media and Sport Department. But as he knows, because I discovered this donation and the information that had been given at the start of the process was incomplete, as soon as I did, I chose to declare that. I recused myself from the process, and the final decision was made not by the Prime Minister but by the Minister for Sport.
And the final question, Iqbal Mahmood.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. I, with many others, supported fully the Football Governance Act and the Independence Regulator, and I do accept the Secretary of State's comments that she sincerely wasn't aware of the donation. But just to reiterate, but does the Secretary of State understand the public's concern that an independent appointment may, or in their perception, was chosen because of their donations to the party in government? And what steps will she and the government take to review the process and make any improvements so that it is trustworthy for the public and completely unimpeachable? And I do understand a comment about donors wanting to participate in public life, but I think the government should consider putting a really clear marker between donors and what kinds of roles they may or may not be able to perform in support of the government.
Can I welcome that and say to him that although overseeing the whole process and the way that public appointments are made is a responsibility for the Prime Minister, I do welcome the comments that he's made and the suggestions that he's made, and the need to uphold the highest standards. In relation to this particular appointment, we didn't meet the highest standards. It was a complicated process. It required a specialist skill set, and it took place under 2 different governments. That is not to make excuses. That is just to explain that this particular process was highly unusual, but we've learnt some lessons from that, and we are implementing the Commissioner's recommendations in full. And can I say to him that in terms of the public having confidence, in the end, the test of whether the public can have confidence in this appointment is whether Mr Cogan and the Independent Football Regulator is able to deliver on the promise of dealing with bad owners and putting fans back at the heart of the game. And I am confident that we've made the right appointment, as evidenced by the fact that he has wasted no time at all since he was appointed on the 6th of October in getting on with the job.
And that concludes the urgent question. Point of order, Louis French.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, I seek your guidance. During the discussion of this urgent question today, the Secretary of State has providing a number of answers that seem to contradict parts of the report here, particularly around the role of the Prime Minister. But in particular, she made reference to a conversation between herself and the new independent chairman of the football regulator before his appearance at the Select Committee. Now, I've read the report very carefully and I cannot find any such reference within the Commissioner's report that references this conversation. I therefore seek guidance from you, Madam Deputy Speaker, why this is not in the report and how honourable members can find out that answer. Thank you.
Does the Secretary of State wish to respond?
I'm very happy to clarify that point for him. This was a request that I made to officials in my department that was relayed to Mr Cogan. It was, of course, his choice whether or not he chose to take that advice, but he did. I have to be clear with him that from the moment that I discovered that there had been donations made to my campaign, I didn't have any discussions with Mr Cogan about this or any other matter. When I recused myself from the process, I took that seriously, and so it was for the Minister of Sport to make the final decision, which she did, but at that point I didn't have direct conversations with Mr Cogan until the Independent Commissioner had been enabled to do his work. I hope that clarifies the matter.
Point of order.
Point of order, Jacob Collier.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Leader of the Opposition recently visited my constituency for her tool theft campaign, but I don't think she's been informed that my honourable friend for Portsmouth North has already secured these changes through the sentencing bill. The Right Honourable Lady did not notify me of this visit, and given she is a long-standing member of this House, I'm seeking your advice, Madam Deputy Speaker, on how she can be reminded of the courtesies afforded to members.
I thank the honourable member for notice of his point of order. Has he given notice to the Leader of the Opposition that he was going to raise this matter? He has put his point on the record. Point of order, Shaukat Adam.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. In the debate, the Secretary of State mentioned that she was aware of my social media post attacking and targeting her. I just want clarity because I've never made a post about the social secretary, so if she would like to clarify that point. My colleagues may have done, we may all look the same, but we're not.
That's absolutely gross.
That is not a point of order or a matter for the Chair. We now move on to the presentation of bills. I'll give a few moments for the front benches to swap over.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
Pleasure, Badenoch. Presentation of Bill, Secretary Peter Kyle.
Industry and Exports Financial Assistance Bill.
Second reading what day?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. Presentation of Bill, Secretary Liz Kendall.
Cyber Security and Resilience Network and Information Systems Bill.
Second reading what day?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow. We now come to the 10-minute rule motion. Jenny Riddle-Carpenter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to make provision about road safety measures near schools and for connected purposes. Madam Deputy Speaker, every parent knows that heart-stopping moment watching their child cross the road and just praying drivers are paying attention. For too many families that I speak to in my constituency of Suffolk Coastal, that silent prayer takes place daily as they drop off their children at school and they pick them up at the end of the day. Road traffic accidents are, tragically, the leading cause of death for children in the UK. And the Royal Society for Protection of Accidents estimates that every single month, 1,200 children are injured in traffic accidents that happen within 500 metres of the school gates. These two statistics hit me hard when I first read them, and I can imagine they hit members across this House just as hard. It was the parents who first told me about their worries over their children's safety when dropping them off and collecting them again after school. And then so did the schools, and then finally, so did the children themselves. When I look at the data, I can see it was telling me the same story. 14% of child fatalities occur during the morning school run between 7 and 9 o'clock, and 23% happen after school between 3 and 5 o'clock. Madam Deputy Speaker, in February of this year, 10-year-old Roman Osborne was hit by a van when leaving his primary school at Pickup in Trimley, St Martin. The driver wasn't speeding or driving recklessly. In fact, witnesses told me that he was travelling at about 20 miles an hour. Luckily, Roman recovered,
but the impact was so severe that he spent 3 days in hospital with a broken hip and many more months recovering. His parents told me that if it hadn't been for him landing on his rucksack, which shielded him from a far more serious injury and potentially head trauma, the outcome would have been tragic. Roman's story reminds us that improving road safety around our schools isn't simply about reducing speeds to 20 miles an hour, though I dread to imagine how much worse it could have been if that driver had been going 30, 40 or faster. In truth, road safety is about making the environment around schools far safer and by any means necessary. That means proper crossings, clear road markings, enforcing parking restrictions, visible signage, and yes, the presence of school patrols, school crossing patrols, and much loved lollipop men and women. But Madam Deputy Speaker, what frustrates me most is that much of these options are available to councils today, but only if they choose to implement them. After this accident, Suffolk County Council told me that the road had been assessed because of Roman's accident, but it did not meet the criteria for additional safety measures. Madam Deputy Speaker, you don't need me to tell you that's not good enough. When a child is injured outside their own school, how can any system say it does not meet the criteria to make that road safer? It should not be at the discretion of any council to turn a blind eye. Bucklesham Primary School, in my constituency, and watching in the gallery today, also know this challenge all too well. The school sits on a junction of a 60 mile an hour and a 30 mile an hour road. It's an isolated rural school with no footsteps or homes around it, and parents have no choice but to drive to school each and every day while navigating awful conditions in the process. Parents and staff have been pleading for improvements for 2 decades. They have gathered petitions, met councillors, written letters, and still after 20 years, no permanent safety measures have been put in place. I presented a petition to this place in September with over 300 signatures because of the road safety issues outside Bucklesham Primary School. These stories and the many others I've heard since being elected are exactly why I've been campaigning relentlessly to improve road safety around our schools. I've taken that campaign to number 10 Downing Street, and today I bring it forward formally to Parliament through this 10 minutes rule bill. Now, the purpose of this bill is simple: to make it a requirement, not an option, for local authorities to take proactive steps to improve safety around schools where there is evidence of potential risk. This bill would place a duty on councils to work directly with schools and communities to assess road conditions, listen to local concerns, and identify practical solutions. Those measures, of course, will differ from place to place because a rural lane in Suffolk looks very different to an urban street in Manchester. But the principle must remain the same. Every child, no matter where they live in this country, deserves to travel safely to school. Yeah. As my bill sets out, a package of local solutions might include more double yellow lines and enforced parking restrictions, improved signage and road markings, dedicated school crossings, more lollipop men and women, and reduced speed zones during drop hours. In short, Madam Deputy Speaker, schools should not have to campaign for safer roads, nor should their pleas fall on deaf ears. They should be able to expect it. Our children should be able to travel to and from school each day without fearing the roads outside their schools. Madam Deputy Speaker, Suffolk has one of the poorest road safety records of any rural county in England. Over the past 20 years across Suffolk, there have been 597 fatalities and 7,000 people seriously injured. 7,500 lives lost or changed forever. In Suffolk coastal alone, more than 1,000 people have either been killed or seriously injured in our roads. And tragically, 17 of these were children. These are our children on our roads, and this is our responsibility. Madam Deputy Speaker, the evidence shows that we can prevent many of these tragedies. The Parliamentary Office for Science and Technology has found strong evidence that 20 mile an hour speed limit and zone reduced casualties and fatalities. After Wales introduced a default 20 mile an hour national speed limit on restricted roads, casualties fell by 24% between April and June last year, compared with the same period the year prior. Now, parents know this instinctively. Surveys show that 36% of parents feel roads are too busy for their children to walk to school, and 43% say traffic is too fast, even when a 20-mile-an-hour zone exists. According to Break, the road safety charity that I've worked with on my campaign and on this bill, 78% of parents want a 20-mile-an-hour limit near homes and schools, and 85% want government to do more to make local roads safer. Yet the framework guiding local road safety decisions mean that too many councils are able to ignore local concerns, even when tragedy strikes. My bill would end that absurdity and end the crisis at our school gates. It would also make transparency a duty. Councils will be required to publish annual statements outlining what safety reviews have been conducted, what measures have been implemented, and how they are working with schools in our community to improve standards. The government is due to publish a new road safety strategy early next year, the first in a decade. I welcome that, and many of the families and schools I speak to welcome that too. But the strategy must put road safety around our schools at the very top of the list. This bill would make that possible by setting out clear expectations for local authorities and giving schools the voice in shaping the solutions they need. The answer is painfully simple. We know what makes our roads safer. The measures are well understood and so often inexpensive. What we lack is urgency and accountability. We should not accept that parents in schools that have been campaigning for 20 years to make drop-off and pick-up safer, yet still have their school hugging a 60-mile-an-hour road. We should not accept that a child is hit by a van and the road is assessed and yet still fails to meet self-determined thresholds for intervention. And we should never forget that the leading cause of death among children in this country is in our gift to reduce, simply by improving road safety around our schools. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not about politics. I'm sure that every member of this House has stood at a school gate and seen speeding cars too fast and too close. And I'm sure that every member in this House has heard the same plea from parents. Roman told me that all he wants is a pedestrian crossing at his school gate. This bill would seek to give Roman that and every school the power to bring forward safety enhancements for their own school. This is a modest bill, but it is practical. And most importantly, it would save lives and it would help to tackle the biggest cause of death amongst children. With this bill, Madam Deputy Speaker, we have the chance to make sure that campaigning is no longer necessary, because safety should be guaranteed by design, by duty and law.
The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare and bring in the bill?
Sarah Coombs, Terry Jermy, Ben Goldsborough, Sarah Dyke, Maya Ellis, Amanda Hack, Richard Quigley, Samantha Niblett, Alison Hume, Steve Witherden, Josie Golding and myself.
Jenny Ribble Carpenter.
Road Safety Schools Bill.
Second reading what day?
28th of November 2025.
28th of November 2025. I'll now give the front benches a few moments to rearrange. We now come to the Opposition Day motion on taxes. I inform the House that Mr Speaker has not selected either of the amendments tabled. So Mel Stride to move the motion.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I beg to move the motion on the order paper. Madam Deputy Speaker, right at the centre of this motion is a single word: trust. The trust that the party opposite lost with the British electorate. They lost it when they promised not to put taxes on farms and did so, when they said they would not be means testing the winter fuel payment, and yet did. And they did it also, Madam Deputy Speaker, when they said that they would not be putting up taxes left, right and centre, but did exactly that when they came into office. Indeed, in their own manifesto, Madam Deputy Speaker, there's around £7 billion worth of tax increases. That's translated by the time of the first budget into some £40 billion of additional tax. And of course, Madam Deputy Speaker, much of that related to national insurance, employers' national insurance, a clear breach of the Labour Party manifesto. Do not take my word for it, take the word of Paul Johnson, the former head of the IFS, who, and I quote, said of the manifesto and that particular tax increase that it was a, quote, straightforward breach of the Labour Party manifesto. Now, the Chancellor also said that she would not be taking decisions that would affect working people. And yet we know, with the figures released just yesterday, that unemployment is now at a 5-year high. 180,000 fewer jobs on payrolls on her watch. And indeed, some sectors particularly badly impacted. Hospitality, some 90,000 jobs destroyed, particularly affecting the youngest people in our country, those desperate to get on that first rung of the career ladder, deprived of that opportunity by the ministers opposite. And of course, after that calamitous budget, Madam Deputy Speaker, there were further pledges and further promises from the Chancellor. She said to the Treasury Select Committee, and I quote, "We are not coming back for more tax increases." She said on Sky News that she would, quote, "wipe the slate clean." And on the 25th of November at the CBI's annual conference, she said this, "I'm not coming back with more borrowing or taxes." There has been little of that language of late.
Welcome back. A full auditorium. I wonder why. You're all here in one go. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed your lunch and your networking time. Just a quick reminder that we will be taking questions throughout the conference, either via Slido or from your good selves on the floor. Our next guest and keynote speaker is the Right Honourable Wes Streeting, Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. Conference would like to welcome the Secretary of State's commitment to the Neighbourhood Health Service and note the enthusiasm for neighbourhood working across the sector and over the last few days here in Manchester. Please welcome to the stage the Right Honourable Wes Streeting, Secretary of State for Health and Social Care.
Thank you, Gillian, so much for that introduction, and thanks to all of you for being here. I'm delighted to be here, given the, or to give the announcement that everyone's been talking about in the news today. That is the government's reforms to NHS system architecture. But I do want to address this leadership speculation up front, because I know there is concern about how long the man in the top job has left. So let me reassure everyone. I'm doing everything I can to persuade Jim Mackey to stick around for as long as possible. And it is a relief, actually, but genuinely great to be here with all of you today. And I'm really grateful, Daniel, for the leadership that you and NHS providers is showing at such a challenging time. But before I get into the challenges, let me just start with the positives. Because right now, we're achieving things in the NHS we've not seen for a long, long time. And I know it's not been easy. I've made considerable demands on you, and will continue to do so. But you've shown over the last year or so that while the NHS was broken, it wasn't beaten. You've provided 5 million more elective appointments, 135,000 more cancer diagnoses within the 28-day target, and cut waiting lists by over 200,000. Ambulance response times and 12-hour waits in A&E are down. There are 2,500 more GPs. In fact, we now have the highest number of GPs on record. You've opened over 100 community diagnostic centres at evenings and weekends, new surgical hubs to bust the backlog, the extra doctors, nurses and mental health staff we need to treat patients on time. And together we've built the 10-year plan for health to create the truly modern health service that we're all crying out for. These are the green shoots of recovery that are beginning to renew confidence and restore faith in our National Health Service for both patients and for our staff. Our investment and modernisation are paying off. And with it, ambition and optimism are returning. It's why I can come here today and say with credibility that we can still cut waiting times to 18 weeks by the end of this Parliament, something few thought possible when we made the commitment in opposition. And while we can do it, and we can do it, while delivering year-on-year improvements to urgent and emergency care, so we can get back to seeing people within 4 hours, and while rebuilding general practice so that patients can get an appointment with their doctor when they need one. So I want to begin by saying to all of you, genuinely, thank you. There's sometimes a perception out there that I'm going to have to really battle this system and all of you to modernise. And it is such a misrepresentation of the leaders I work with. NHS leaders and frontline staff are not only chomping at the bit for change, you're the ones showing the world that it can be delivered. There's a real can-do culture back in the NHS. But, and it's a big but, there is also a great deal of jeopardy out there, from economic constraints, winter pressures, industrial action, and the political forces willing us all to fail. So there's a lot of pressure on our shoulders too, because we all know how important the NHS is to our country, how central it is to the lives of every family in this land, and how strongly we believe in the values that have underpinned it since 1948, values that are becoming increasingly contested. So it's important, I think, for us to keep in mind the consequences if we get this wrong. Millions are counting on us, and there's much, much more to do. So this isn't the moment to ease off the gas. This is the moment to push our foot harder on the accelerator. One reason why we see renewed confidence is the rigid focus you've brought to reducing waste and increasing productivity while improving services at the same time. In fact, reducing waste and increasing productivity are essential to improving patient services and staff experience. This government is investing an extra £26 billion in the NHS this year. We continue to be relative winners of budgets and spending reviews, although you and I know what the word relative means, which is why I'm always relatively happy at how we do at budget time. And we owe it to patients, to staff and to taxpayers to make sure that every penny that's going into this service is money well spent. That's why I'm really proud that for the first time in years, the NHS is in balance 7 months into the financial year. It's not going to be easy to stay on track for the rest of this year, especially with the double whammy of strikes and winter to come. But breaking even is a huge shift from the £6.6 billion deficit we were looking at. There are people out there saying that universal healthcare, free at the point of need, is no longer affordable or possible. And everyone in this room and beyond is proving them wrong. So this isn't just a technocratic accounting triumph. It is the foundation of everything else, because it's ultimately what will allow us to invest again in staff, technology and services, all of which add up to better patient experience. It also gives me, but all of us, credibility with the Chancellor. The government inherited public finances with a £22 billion black hole. And it won't have escaped your notice that the public finances and the wider economy are still under serious strain. So there is no money to waste. And I think that it's really important that we accept with some humility that one of the reasons the Chancellor's having to make some unpopular choices